Hello and welcome. It is another fantastic Friday afternoon, and I am so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining, whether you are live or you are coming at us from the future, where you all have lived a little bit more of your story than you have so far today. We are excited because every week brings with it new parts of our story, our personal story, our business story. And for me, as I look back over the past month or so, one of the things I have found myself thinking about a lot, talking about a lot, is this idea of connection. That stories connect us. They connect us to our customers, they connect us to each other, they connect us even to ourselves, you could argue. And connection is vital for action. If we want to take action, if we have an idea, if we want to execute on something, if we want to do something, it's very rare that we do that on our own. And connection is also what we do in these streams. Every Friday, we get together and we have a look at a website, and we do a story teardown of that website. Sometimes we're lucky enough to have somebody from the company on board, but most of the time they are an unsuspecting victim that we've picked from the magical roulette of the internet, where all of our web pages, all of our home pages sit, and we pick on somebody. And we picked on a whole variety of companies. So that's what we love to do on Fridays. It's a nice fun way to wrap up the week. And before I do that, I like to make sure we've got a bit of context. And so let's make sure we connect to that context, shall we? And that context is this idea of the power of 3D story. The power to see our story from different perspectives, different angles, the power to use our story for our own ends, for our success. There's all sorts of power packed into it. And the 3D stand for something, we'll get to that in a minute, but it also has that metaphor, doesn't it? The 3D object, being able to see something from all angles. And when you can see your story from all angles, you have a better chance of getting a hold of it, better chance of getting a handle on it, and a better chance of then using that intentionally. So I love that about it. And when we take that and we go out there to the wild of the internet and have a look at somebody's webpage, we can use it to answer questions about, is that web page, is that homepage, is that best first foot forward of that company doing the things that we like to see in the power of 3D story? Is it using this power to its strategic ends? Now, one of the things that you may start to notice the more you join these streams or see the content that I share on LinkedIn is I try pretty hard not to talk about storytelling. And there's a reason for that. The telling, the act, the verb, if you will, the action of storytelling needs the noun, it needs the thing of story. The storytelling in its own right is a thing that exists out there in the world, and some of us are great at it, some of us are good at it, some of us are terrible at it, but we can all do it. It's a core part of how our brain works and how we communicate. And it's a core part of how our brain works because our brain's operating system is actually story. We're constantly putting ourselves into this story in the world. And because of that fact, it's how we operate. And because that's how we operate, the storytelling makes a lot of sense, right? Because when somebody's sharing a story and it's got the people and the challenges and the things that were going on and what happened and the ups and the downs. We understand that because we live that ourselves every single day. But the storytelling itself is only one piece of the puzzle. What we need to make sure that we do is we really get a hold of that story. And that's why I frequently will steer people away from just focusing on the telling aspect. Look, we can all walk, right? Well, to be fair, some of us can't. So respect where respect is due. But if you take the average human being who can walk, that doesn't mean you can run a marathon. It doesn't mean you could even run a mile and not be out of breath. Just because we have the muscles, just because we can do the basic act, doesn't mean that we are excellent at it. Now, we don't all need to be running marathons of storytelling. However, I guarantee you there's an opportunity for you to build that muscle, build that stamina, and get better at the telling of it. But getting better at the telling of it doesn't really matter, especially in business, if you don't have the it. And when we look at the web pages that we look at in our streams, we're really focused on that. What is the it that they're trying to communicate here? And are they doing it? And if they're not, there's obviously an opportunity to improve. So I have been a storyteller for as long as I can remember. And in 2012, I had this opportunity to actually get paid to be a storyteller, where I was hired to be chief storyteller for Microsoft, one of Microsoft's divisions, Microsoft Dynamics. This was back in the day before you ever even heard of this type of role. But the person who hired me had seen in me the storytelling aspect alongside my passions around technology and marketing. And it became a really good fit for what the organization was trying to do, to trying to have relevance against products that people just got, whether that was Office or was Xbox. And Dynamics didn't have that. It didn't have a narrative that people already understood. So we had to build that from scratch. And when I got tapped for this role, I was excited at first. And then as I started to actually get into the role, I found that I panicked. I ran into the fact that there just wasn't a lot of resources out there for business storytelling. Now, I don't want you to panic. And luckily, you've got me, and I've trodden this path before you, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel on this. But the wheel that I found myself inventing at the time, at first as a story interpreter at Microsoft, and then later after leaving and forming Go Narrative, where I really got stuck into building the frameworks and building the sort of the architecture, the tools that you can pull out and use whenever you need, like the power of 3D story, was that at the time, I couldn't find anything that was really appropriate. There were resources out there, but they weren't really appropriate resources, right? We're talking about things like the hero's journey, which Joseph Campbell, God bless him, came up with based on an analysis of literature and film. And it's awesome. If you're a story geek, especially an entertainment story geek, it is absolute gold. The problem is that it's an artifact. And not only is it an artifact, it's an artifact about artifacts. So those movies and those books that he analyzed to decode and then encode the hero's journey, they are outcomes of this idea of story. They are a form of expression of storytelling. You go to a movie theater and you get exposed to that. You read a book, you get exposed to that. But they're not the source of power. And it's that source of power that we want to help you with, and that I'm passionate about, because I just know how useful it is, how it can remove so many of the obstacles that you face whether you're talking about clarity of your message, whether you're maybe you're a leader who is worried that the team isn't going to be able to adopt the strategy that they've developed. So this isn't just marketing, right? This could be these internal efforts that you have as a leader. It could be frustration of having launched a brand new partner program and the partners themselves aren't getting on board with what you're trying to do. And you've realized that your business's survival depends on that very thing. You're not necessarily the person who is crafting the narrative for the business. Maybe you are in the C-suite, maybe you are a founder, but you might be a leader of a business unit. You might be somebody who's responsible for the brand. You might be somebody who's responsible for customer experience, or even somebody who's responsible for the hiring story, right? So a chief people officer. Any of these roles have to bring people along with them as they find better ways for their companies to achieve the it of whatever the company's mission is. It could be something like having a new vision to articulate, or a post-reorganization identity crisis that a company goes through. If you've lived and worked in corporate America, you'll know what I mean by that one. It could be that your company is scaled faster than the story has been able to keep up with. It could be a culture shift when a founder steps back. These are all, we hear these and we can imagine these scenarios, these stories that we've seen out there in the real world. I was working at Microsoft when the reins were handed over from Bill Gates to Steve Ballmer, and that was a big shift. I was also there when Satya Nadella took over. So joined very basically around the first one, and then left shortly after the second one. And it's a big cultural shift, and these things can take time. And I remember when it happened that second time and Satya Nadella was taking over, he said he used this really interesting quote, which was attributed, I think, to the chap from GM. And it was, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what is culture? Culture is a collection of all the stories that we tell ourselves, right? And if we can understand what we're trying to do, and we can understand what the story looks like, and we can understand what the stories that we could tell look like, then we have control over that, right? And loss of control as a leader feels like what? Does not feel good, right? What am I going to do now? What do I have to do to fix this thing? Where do I need help? Where am I going to have to find support, right? Loss of control is not a good thing. And as we start to kind of go deeper down into any organization, the need to be able to communicate clearly and to bring people on that journey doesn't go away. So you could be at a director level, right? And you still have this opportunity. Do you know your story? What is your story? Can you tell your story? There's this why of what we do, there's how we go about doing it, and then there's the what we deliver in the world. Most people spend most of their time when they describe what they do, describing the what, right? If you take what Go Narrative does, the reason why I got into this in the first place goes back much further than what I already shared. It actually goes back to very formative memories where I struggled to engage and communicate with the people that were around me in the environment that I was in, and because I was a baby. And my parents had bought a fixer-upper that needed to be fixer-upped to be a fixer-upper, basically a building site. And the only safe room for a baby to be left alone was one of the rooms in the attic. So bedtime, nap time, and any time my increasingly pregnant mother had to get me out from under her feet, I was put into that environment. So I had to learn very early both how to read the story that was going on, which was chopping and changing all the time, and to then communicate in a way that would hopefully either get me out, keep me out of the attic, or get me to the attic, right? And then, of course, if I wanted to come out again, how am I going to achieve that, right? As an infant, and then as a very small child, that is a challenging environment. And that's what forged me to be the storyteller that I am. And I've spent my whole life figuring this out. And in fact, at some point in my early years, back in 1986, I started to experiment with diaries and journal keeping. And then in 1990, I started doing it in February every single day, and I still do it today. And in fact, I've got a couple of them right here and a whole bookshelf of them behind me. And for me, that's been writing my story, writing the stories. If you've ever come in contact with me and I've had a positive or a negative experience with you, you're in my diaries. That's always a fun one to tell people. And I'm using that to try and figure out my story every night. And as I finished writing my diary last night, it was a bit of a longer one last night, felt much better. I'd gone into it feeling I was tired. I'm juggling a lot of balls with the business. We're going through a big implementation right now from our marketing operations system. And we've got new team members on board. So we're going through a lot right now, juggling a lot. And it was just one of those days. We all have them, right? And so that's, for me, the why of why I do this is it's a core of who I am. What is your core? What is your why? And that's why I became a why certified coach, to help with that. Because when I looked at things like the hero's journey, they were not giving us what we needed to be able to tell better business stories. And when we look at a core of any story, it's the why. Emotion is required to get us to do anything in this world. That could be the pain of a splinter, or it could be the desire of a fancy car, or a fancy holiday, or a break, right, from whatever it is that we do. So as we ladder this back up to what we're talking about, we've got these tools that are not useful because they're too complicated. And on the other end of the spectrum, we've got these other tools, like people say, beginning, middle, and end. And arguably, that's too simple, right? So as I was working through all this, I became obsessed with this idea of finding something that kind of straddled these two worlds, something that was simple enough to get going with, but had the depth that as you went deeper and deeper into it, you could unlock more, yet I wouldn't have to explain that to you. I could tell you the story about why it came about. You could adopt it. You could start using it in your own stories, and you could unravel that knot, and you could end up benefiting more and more over time. And that's in fact why I wrote this book, The Storytelling for Action Playbook. And it's literally, there is not an electronic version of this, and you can't get it for a reason, because it's a workbook. This is intended to have you sit down and to work through your ideas about the power of 3D story, and then 8 other frameworks that we have as well. But if you tell somebody beginning, middle, and end, where do you start? What goes in the middle? Where do the people go? Are there heroes? Are there not heroes? Are there central characters? Is there a villain? Do we talk about that? Is that the right language? What happens at the end? How do we wrap it up? Is that like a call to action because it's business? Is it different because it's a story? And all these questions start to come up. And I became obsessed with finding this Goldilocks moment. And that is the power of 3D story. And once we've got the power of 3D story, we can just use it, start using it every single day. And we can use it with somebody's website. Where does it all start then? When we think about the power of 3D story, when we think about, and yes, you can, by the way, you can get the book. It's available on Amazon. Thank you for that question. That's absolutely, yep. And okay, yes, checking where there was any other questions. That is where you can get it. So where do we start? What is this thing, right? Well, before we go there, I want to talk about what's at the heart, at the center of every story. And that is this want, this need, this desire. I said it before, I'll say it again. And that is nothing, we do not change if we do not have a motivation to do so. And it's not a reason to do so, it's a feeling to do so. That can be running away from something or running towards something. And one of the things that comes up all the time, and we constantly hear it, and I've heard it now for well over a decade when it comes to storytelling, is, emotions are fluffy. And I say no, emotions are not fluffy. Emotions are functional. Emotions are the forcing function for us to do something. If we're not feeling any different, we carry on in a straight line. This is so fundamental. It's actually directly related to the fundamental law of the universe, Newton's first law of thermodynamics, and that is an object at rest will remain at rest unless it's acted upon by an equal and opposite force. There's lots of different ways you can say it, but basically an object keeps doing what it's doing unless a different force acts upon it, right? And it's if you like to think about atoms and quantum physics and stuff like that, which I do have a little bit of a tendency to do so because of my passion for science and sci-fi, you start to think about the tiny subatomic level of all of the forces that are at play, bumping into each other, the energies that are at play, and how that accrues up to who we are and how we're going through. I was on a walk earlier, and I was imagining I was thinking very much about the energy of the human body and the energy of plants versus like a dead tree that's used as a telegraph pole, right? And thinking about the different types of energy signatures that you would have across these different things, and thinking about how all that's bumping into everything, right? So it's not just like a ball being still and then being kicked, right? But that's a really easy way to think about it. A splinter is another really easy way to think about it. If you have a splinter, you want to get it out. It can be the tiniest thing, but it's pressing a nerve, right? And that nerve is giving you a feeling. And a feeling is, as described with a little bit of additional fancy human, let's make things a bit more complicated, emotion, right? So emotions, feelings, they're all rooted in our body, right? And in fact, even psychotherapy talks about this. Feelings, emotions, all rooted in the body. And so that tiny little splinter touching that, triggering that nerve, it's so small, yet it feels so painful. That's going to motivate you to get that out. And when we look at the website Teardown, we're going to see the types of feelings that we think that the customers who go to this website will be experiencing. So feelings are functional. They're not fluffy. And it's something that I really love talking about because it's so central to thinking about how we get our customers to do something. And that is why story is important, not just the telling, but understanding it. If we don't understand what it is that's driving our customers to come to our website, how can we engage with them? Now, wouldn't it be nice if in life we got everything that we wanted as soon as we wanted it? Yes, it would be. But it is not, and life is fraught with difficulty, isn't it? It's fraught with things standing in our way. I mean, if you spend just a few moments to think about, what was the last thing you wanted to do or get? Maybe it was a work-related thing. Maybe it's a big aspiration you have at work. Maybe you've got your heart set on a certain car. Or maybe you are thinking about taking your family on vacation, or maybe you play a certain sport and there's equipment for that sport and it's expensive and you're thinking about buying it, or you want your child to have the best education. You're thinking about how do I help them with university and what does that look like? Every single one of these things takes research. It takes understanding. Like that's why Google became what it is, because as soon as we start putting on the internet, it provided us with this wonderful opportunity to go and find more information to inform our decisions, because we love to do that, don't we? Because we want to feel good about our decisions. We don't want to feel like we made a bad decision. Notice how I'm talking about feelings again. And those were consumer examples, but if you think about those business examples, what if you are in AI and you're thinking about data center investments? what types of difficulty, what kinds of challenges stand in the way when you're trying to go through that type of process, right? And we could spend all day going through all sorts of examples. And this is core to not only how we do business, but it's core to the stories we end up telling about business. When Bill Gates was handing over to Steve Ballmer, he told the story about starting the company. When Steve Ballmer handed over to Satya Nadella, he talked about both the story of being involved with starting the company and taking over from Bill Gates. And Satya Nadella talked about his story with his history and his family and what he cares about, and his son in particular, I believe. He talked about the reasons, the emotional drivers behind his choices to do what he does. And he did those things, right? Went through those things, made that story, lived that story, and then told that story. Now, we don't always intentionally make the story, but we do live it, and then we can tell it. And when you have control and you understand the power of 3D story, you can be intentional about the story you want to make. As Ben Horowitz says, in the best companies, the story is the strategy. Story is a strategy tool. It is a way for you to better understand your strategy, better communicate your strategy, and better get people along with your strategy at its very core. And then you can apply that to everything from brand to people to partner parts of your organization to new products, you name it. Every single one of those has a different untangling. It's a different way through the forest. And that untangling is what you go through living the story. It's what our customers go through. It's what our clients go through when they're living the story. Our job as a service provider, as a product builder, is to help our customers do that. It's the very foundation of the idea for a new product. I've got this thing that bothers me, or I know that there's this thing that bothers these people. How can I make it better and build something or create a service that does that? And you're helping them through that. You're not doing everything, right? They've still got to do the work. They've got to buy your product. They've got to use your product and probably use other people's products alongside your product. And then when they go home that night and need to relax, using different products, right? So it's this invention, turning ideas into reality and helping people through the story that they are living so that they can get to a place where they can tell it. And what happens when you create an amazing experience for your customers? They have a great story to tell, don't they? And because storytelling is our operating system, it means that not only are we able to look at what's going on in our lives or what's happened in our lives and what's going on in our business, we're able to actually look at all those things holistically. And it's not a fluffy exercise to take your personal story and say, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? And if you feel stuck, which a lot of our clients do, if you feel stuck, you're probably stuck in a story that you're not super happy with. And because you have control over that story, you can choose to make a different story. The thing I love about focusing on storytelling all the time is I have the privilege of telling myself every single day, this is the story that we're trying to make here, right? And on bad days, that actually turns out to be a really, really helpful thing, because it's like that LinkedIn post I did in the summer about lying on the hospital gurney, looking at the paint peeling on the ceiling of the hospital in Athens, and thinking to myself, well, my son's safe. He had an allergic reaction. He was lying next to me on the gurney. We are going to have to get up super early for the Acropolis. It was our first day on holiday, on vacation. And so there's a lot of difficulty. We're going to be still working through here. We're going to be tired. but I will have a great story to tell because of it. And the beauty of that is, it's not just about when we say we'll laugh about this one day, right? When something bad happens, it's so much bigger than that, because it can be the good, the bad, the ugly. And there's often something that we learn from these experiences. Like what I learned from that experience with my son about telling the story to the server rather than just stating the facts. So yes, even myself as a storyteller, I have to keep lifting the weights of story every day so that I keep building those muscles and take it out for a test drive. Now, once you've done these things, that is bringing all these things together. That's what we call the power of 3D story. And that is desire, difficulty, and denouement. Fancy French word. And this is the power of 3D story. What does that central character in your story want? What is standing in their way? And how do you help untangle that knot and help them transform? Because at the end of the day, every single story is about transformation. It's about going from A to B and how going from A to B happened. It's about why we wanted to go from A to B and what we used to go from A to B and what we learned going from A to B. Stories are transformation at their core. And we hear about transformation in business all the time. Every time you hear the word transformation, I want you to think, what is the story here? And if you do that, you're using the power of 3D story, because you'll start thinking, what did we, they, us, the company, the customer, the client want? What stood in the way? And then how did we untangle that knot? It is the perfect starting point. Now, there's more, right? A, you can go deep into the power of 3D story, but B, you can go and look at the big picture, such as narrative level, the big story. And we have a framework, the TRIPS story, our approach in the workshopping we do around the TRIPS storytelling methodology. And that is the transformation, the reasons to believe, the innovation that you bring to the table, the problems that crop up along the way. A bit different to difficulty, but the problems getting going, the problems that happen along the way, the problems that you experience when you're trying to solve through it, and then stories. Because there are stories at each level. There's stories at the transformation, the world, the industry level that justify going in this direction. There are reasons to believe. There's not just the data, but there's stories, there's the emotions, why things need to happen or need to change. An innovation that you bring to the table, there's maybe a founder's story or a company story, there's stories there. And the problems, there's case studies, customer stories, right? So there's the TRIP storytelling methodology, there's our meet your customers in their story, morals, essential emotions, and truth. And you can get all of that from the book. And if you have questions about that today, ask them in the chat, any questions at all. And at the end, we'll also make sure that you've got some additional resources to connect with us, because the book will help you and you can do it if you've got the time and the bandwidth on your own. And of course, we are always able to help. Now, I know that you've all come here for a reason, and that is to see a teardown of a company's page. And this week, I am excited to go back to the world of technology. And in the world of technology, as we know, there's the interconnectedness of everything, just like we talked about at the beginning of the stream, right? Connection, the stories connect us all, and technology connects us. And when we have technology connected, we also have security challenges. And the company that we're going to look at today is actually not just about security, but that is a part of the story. We are looking at our friends over at Cloudflare. Now, Cloudflare is an interesting company. I have, like many of you who are also a little bit on the geeky side, who've ever played around with anything on the web, been in any of the forums, you'll have come across this company, right? They're often one of the alternate DNS options that people cite for GoDaddy or any of the other big hosting companies. And the challenge of having a website as well is we want a fast website, right? We want that delivery. We want the throughput. We want all of those elements of the network to work really well as well. So it's not just about security, right? It's a web page is not only that best foot forward we have from the stories we tell, but the experience too. And if it doesn't work or it's slow, that's going to be frustrating for customers, right? And that's very much obviously the business that Cloudflare exists within. It doesn't want its customers to have churn. It doesn't want the engineers at its customers to be under constant fire drill, right? We hear that word fire drill in business, and we know some of the emotions that come with it, right? And Cloudflare's business have got this, help build a better internet is their mission. Is pretty clear, right? I would say that's a nice, clear mission. And they've got relentless storytelling through their innovation weeks and their press outreach. And they've got great bottom-up adoption through the freemium offerings that crop up in the forums that I mentioned. And they have some pretty disruptive pricing that's shaken the market up as well. But you might say, what about their story? I would say that they've got some pretty good strategic clarity on the one hand, but if we invoke Ben Horowitz and say in the best companies, the story is a strategy, and we go to the web page, what are some of the first things that we look at when we go to the website, when we do the teardown? Well, one of the first things I look for people. Do I see people anywhere on here? Let's see. Do you see people anywhere on here? Connect, protect, and build everywhere. We make websites, apps, and networks faster and more secure. Our developer platform is the best place to build modern apps and deliver AI initiatives. And of course, there's below the fold. However, I want to mention a couple of things here. Bit of a 101 when it comes to marketing and sales. It's always good to go back to our roots and to remember some of the basics. Sometimes somebody lands on our site and they know what they need, or they at least are in that realm of what they need. They're in the problem solving, they're weighing up the options, they're looking at whether they should go one way or the other. They might be quite far down the buying cycle, but not everybody is that far down the buying cycle. Some folks are turning up and they are just starting to realize that they need to more intentionally deal with their networking challenges that they have. Maybe it's been delegated to them to go and figure this out. Now, we've all been at different points within the cycle for consumer products, and some of us for enterprise products, or even for small businesses and making decisions around infrastructure. We just went through one of those recently. And a part of that is features. Can this thing do what I need it to do? Yes, that is a part of the it. But that is a subset of what I or you are trying to achieve, what we're making, the story that we're going through. And like I said, remember, story is our operating system. It's here whether you want it to be or not, whether you care about storytelling or not. It's happening right now in your brain. You're here because you want to dial up your capabilities when it comes to the power of story, and then become a better business storyteller because of it, to get that clarity, to remove the roadblocks. So when we think about our website, we need to make sure that we're able to capture people across different parts of the customer journey. And so when I look at this, I start to ask some of those questions. I say things like, okay, so I see a lot of what here? Connect, protect, build. We make website apps, networks faster and more secure. I know of other companies that do that. More secure. Okay, so there's probably some research that they've got that they're using to back that statement up. Their legal department will have made sure that that's the case. Our developer platform is the best place to build modern apps and deliver AI initiatives. The legal department will have made sure that the marketing team has got the facts to back that up, because if not, they might get sued by one of their competitors, especially if that competitor has got some data and some evidence to prove that that's different. Deliver AI initiatives. So there's some bold statements here, right? But I'm getting a distinctly curse of knowledge inside out vibe from this. We make, okay, websites, apps, that's your stuff. Yeah, your stuff is websites, apps, networks, faster and more secure. Yeah. You want it to be fast, you want it to be secure. We make it happen. I mean, if you're at a team building event and that person comes into the room and says, I make everything here better. How do you feel about that person? Really? And they're wearing a bright orange suit. Our developer platform is the best place. So you got some pretty bold ego-related statements going on here. What's working, right? Well, it aligns with what people are thinking about, right? When you've got edge infrastructure and you have the 310 plus cities, 120 countries, and you've got some, you've got the facts to back you up on that, right? But how does that make you feel, right? Is it specific? I say it lacks specificity. Well, you got to scroll down the page. Well, maybe. I mean, am I going to find it? Shall we have a look? Our connectivity cloud, all these services, connect your users and apps. This is the face you're putting out to the internet as a company, right? Protect and accelerate websites. Okay, so I would hope that all of this stuff would be possible. Okay, so they can help with AI stuff. There's some statements about challenges here. Okay, I'm still trying to scroll. One global network, unlike any other. One global network, unlike any other. I think somebody might have been watching a few too many Marvel movies before they came up with the brief for this. Connect, protect, build. Is that still loading? Is that why it did that? Connect users and apps securely. Okay, so we got some potential stories down here. Discord is where the world builds relationships. Cloudflare helps us deliver on that mission. Connecting our internal engineering team to the tools they need with Cloud. This is just such typical, let's get a customer quote stuff. I used to do a bunch of this customer story stuff at Microsoft. I was fighting tooth and nail. It's not just problem, solution, benefit. Let's talk about, in this case, Discord. What is it? What are the challenges? Why is it hard? Where is the pain? I want to feel the pain. Show me you know my pain. And it's not just about making things better and faster and stronger, right? It's kind of like saying our new and improved product. Well, if you have a new product, I really hope it's improved. I guess there's been products we've all bought, sometimes phones, and we're like, is this better? Is this actually improved? It's new. So new and improved, faster, stronger. Where is the emotional relief that I should be getting from this as somebody who is responsible for networking? The Power 3D story would say, yeah, I might want faster, safer, more scalable infrastructure. And I'll give you that, because you know what? There's actually a step before that, which is it's slow as heck and it's causing me major problems. Or safer, it's unsecure, and I got dragged in front of whoever, board, court, you name it. More scalable infrastructure. We have been told we're expanding to new countries and we can't do it, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. Like, there's a whole bunch before we even get to I need a faster, safer, more scalable infrastructure. But even when we get there, we start to think about what's the difficulty, right? It's fatiguing to go through this process. there's probably costs that are skyrocketing, problems with the current infrastructure and all of these threat vectors. So we need to start to then unpack, what is the difficulty? Why is it challenging to go through this experience? What challenges are forcing me into the experience in the first place? There is so much emotional, functional emotions there that we can tap into. And I am not seeing any of them on Cloudflare's website. I would like to see something that, by all means, when we get to talking about offering a unified edge platform with zero egress, built-in security and tools to scale without penalty, that we're also then answering those questions about making you feel better. A recommended rewrite on this could be something like, build boldly on the internet's most innovative edge where speed meets peace of mind and pricing doesn't punish your ambition. Look, what did we do there? What did we achieve? We achieved actually allowing the ego at Cloudflare to be heard and to be seen. And we put our arms around it and said, it's okay, you can be on the homepage. But we've also said, peace of mind. We've said, doesn't punish your ambition, right? There's clearly some pride. I'm detecting some pride at Cloudflare. You got some pride. Good for you. Let's channel that pride in a way that connects with people. And even if somebody is coming in and trying to make a decision around two big potential options, and they're looking down at the various speeds and feeds, as it often gets called in technology, features, speed of things, capabilities, at the end of the day, all of that stuff can be copied, and it's getting easier and easier and easier to copy the what. It's getting harder and harder and harder to differentiate on the why. Focus on the why and everything will follow. It's an engine you have to take care of. And then we've got the experience of the buyer's journey, right? What is working here? Maybe we've got the developer first aspect. There's strong documentation and materials, as we saw when we scrolled down through the website. But we don't grasp anything about the freemium wheel creating shared value. Like, they could be talking about all of the people, or the websites, the millions that are protected by Cloudflare because of their community efforts. And those community efforts, those people who are building those community efforts, are sometimes the people who are making the decisions at the corporations. And of course, that's a part of the strategy. It makes sense. Kudos, Cloudflare. It makes a lot of sense to invest there. Now, imagine that you can connect the dots so that the other people in the buying committee are also feeling that. They also feel safer because it's millions of sites, right? And there's opportunities there to really start dialing that up. And for the folks who are late stage, who are like, yeah, let's get going pretty soon, just got to kind of check some boxes on, it's either going to be Cloudflare or these other guys or gals. Trusted, having some more proof points. And is it trusted by the 77% of the Fortune 100, or fueled by 20 new product launches per quarter, ready when you are? Like, telling a growth story that enterprise customers and those buyers who appear to be more logic driven are making decisions about, but they have a why too, and they want to look good. It's kind of the classic, nobody gets fired for buying IBM. Who are the people who are buying IBM in that story, right? In that context, what is it that they're doing? They're buying servers. Why are they buying them? Because they know their job's going to be secure, right? So maybe there's something similar here. Maybe we can speak to the enterprise buyer and we can make them feel a certain way. And yeah, there's going to be maybe some more functional messaging around that. But don't forget that every buyer is still a human. Now, the jury's out on when superintelligence is going to hit. And when, even on the road to that, we're going to have agents buying from agents and things are going to get really different really soon. It's why I keep saying we need to train AI on story so that it understands humans and what our operating system is, so that it can be benevolent about us, and that we can have a partnership and continue working together with technology in the future rather than being replaced by technology. But in the meantime, it is still humans selling to humans and communicating to humans. So we want to think about that, and we want to all the way down to our conversion buttons rather than just start for free, right? It's like 4+ million developers already do, or talk to sales and see how Cloudflare helped Discord cut costs by whatever it happens to be. And all of these pieces go back to that denouement, right? How are we untangling that knot? So you've got a story that's the website. You've got a story that's the company strategy. You've got a story in your customers. There's stories everywhere. And so when you understand that, when you understand that stories are everywhere, when you understand that your story, your company story, your customer story, your strategy story, your website story, your campaign story, when you understand that every single one of these things has a story, because there's people who want things, that are trying to navigate difficulties, that are trying to figure that out and untangle that, all of that. When you understand the power of 3D story, you can apply it as a tool to all of these things. And it helps you be a better storyteller because you have that accessible framework. And this is what drove me crazy about Hollywood and the hero's journey and entertainment storytelling, and why I have been so hell-bent on helping business people tap into the power of story rather than helping business people get better at storytelling. Getting better at storytelling will come if you focus on the core. It's what we get coached when we are driving on the racetrack, is speed follows smoothness. Smooth is fast. When you are driving a race car, you are responsible for managing the weight of that vehicle, and that weight shifts through acceleration, through braking, through cornering. And that weight is managed and transferred through the application of power and traction through the tires, the mechanical grip. Smooth inputs mean you're faster. Even if you do all the other stuff right, hit the apex, if you don't do it smoothly, you won't be as fast as you can be. And it's like that with storytelling. Being a good storyteller requires being good at understanding story. When you understand story, you can understand your story. You can understand how that connects to why you do what you do. They are related. Your story and your why are intimately related. That puts you where you are doing the awesome stuff you're doing for the world in the role, if you're an employee or as the owner, founder, or leader of the organization, the story of your career or the story of your team or the story of your division or the story of your company, and how that story connects with the bigger story of the culture that you're in, the country that you're in, the other companies that you are doing business with. And all of these things come back to that foundation, that foundational operating system. And that is story. And that is why I love, as we have this placeholder for the web there, to always come back to this. I do it all the time. No matter how complicated a narrative we're building, it's all about the desire, the difficulty, and the denouement. There's stories within stories within stories. When you're doing a narrative, you've got customer stories, employee stories. You've got the story of where the company's come from and where it's going to, but all of those are stories. And I want to ask you, how you're going to take these three things and how you're going to then go and apply them, right? It's that what is next. You've got the opportunity to go grab the first chapter from our website, gonarrative.com. You can get that. You can actually get the Power of 3D Story, the first chapter, download that in exchange for your email. We promise it will be worthwhile. You can also discover your business story type up there as well. And I want you to think about what you're going to do next. What is the story that you're going to understand first? Is it your story? Right? We do a story discovery. It's a limited number of seats at a time, but we take you through that process of understanding what your story is. And that is incredibly powerful. Or it could be a project that you're working on. And I would say just do something simple. Think about something that happened to you today and use the Power of 3D Story to then go tell that story to a family member or a friend. If you're driving on the way home today, you may well get some drivers to tell stories about, right? Somebody cuts you off. What does that feel like? How did you handle it, right? What did you learn from that experience? And you take all that and then you end up telling a story. And then you've got your work tomorrow, your mission, whatever it is that you choose to do. And thinking about what story are you going to tell tomorrow? And I want to say thank you for trusting your time in joining me today and having us be a part of your story. And if you have questions, pop along to the website. You can even shoot me an email here and let me know what story you're trying to tell. There's a ton of resources. If you go and take the business story assessment, it'll help you figure out what story you should be telling right now. We have a cyclical process loosely attached to change management, the 7 business story types. And again, it's all about this understanding the story. So much about practicality, and having spent my whole life trying to figure my story out and writing my whole story and having the pleasure to get to work with you, and whether that's on this stream and getting to share some ideas about one of our victims again. And I'll say thank you to Cloudflare. If you happen to see this, hopefully you take something away from it. But all of our websites, we can always be going back and asking ourselves these kind of questions. And go ahead and do it to the Go Narrative website. Is it do you believe it's doing everything that we talked about today? I hope so. It should be. That we do look at it through the same lens as we just looked at Cloudflare's website. But thank you so much for joining today. As always, Friday fun, doing a web teardown. Excited to hear what story you're going to tell. And if you've got a website or a company that you would like us to do a teardown on, let us know. Shoot us an email at gnhelp@gonarrative.com. And we look forward to hearing from you. Have a wonderful weekend. And don't forget, what story will you tell tomorrow?